I suppose now that I'm making videos again, I should probably show you the environment in which I get to make these videos. So that's it. There's really not that much space in order to film anything. Kind of makes it a little bit difficult. But there is one thing here that I have access to that I haven't had access to in the past, and that is that big old TV behind me. Now that's not just a regular TV, and it doesn't have cable, but what it does have is an internet connection and the ability to access things like HBO Go or Netflix. Now, I'm really late to the Netflix game, and I'm sure any of you guys that watch Netflix knows that there's a ton of TV shows from the past that are readily available on there. Now, I've been watching some of those series, so I think maybe it's time to do a little bit of a news segment where I talk about some of the TV shows I watched in the past and talk about, whether or not they held up or whether or not they didn't. We'll call it Attack of the Netflix. And for the first episode, we'll talk about one of the shows from my youth, Batman Beyond. Now, first we'll talk a bit about the background information about this TV show. It kind of exists in the middle of the whole DC animated universe run. It came after the original Batman animated series and the newer seasons of that, which had a little bit of a difference, so some people don't call them the same thing, and was followed by the Justice League cartoon. It aired from 1999 to 2001 and consisted of 52 episodes over 3 different seasons. Now, it kind of just ended in order to make way for the Justice League cartoon, but we'll get to that in a bit. Basically, it's a futuristic Batman wherein you have a new character, Terry McGinnis, that takes over the mantle of the costume and the superhero and all that, replacing Bruce Wayne, who got way too old to deal with the stress of it and just couldn't handle fighting crime anymore physically and probably emotionally too. But he's still in the series, which in fact is one of my favorite parts of it. Let's get to that. Now, I think there's a couple main reasons Batman Beyond works as a TV show. First of all, the setting is interesting. It's cool to see Gotham City and all the people that populate it and the superheroes and the supervillains deal with a futuristic setting where the worries of a future are there. The increased technology, whether or not we're mature enough to deal with that as a society, the gap between the rich and the poor becoming bigger, all those things are addressed in the series. Though it is still funny to think of a newspaper even existing in this world. Like, at this point in 2013, newspapers barely exist. In 2040 or whatever this year is supposed to be, they'd be long gone. The series also works because of the relationship between Terry McGinnis and Bruce Wayne. It's cool to see their dynamic go back and forth. Basically, you've got Terry, who's the younger dude who doesn't entirely know what's going on because, let's face it, he's 17. No amount of juvenile hall time is going to make him a hardened crime fighter. And then you got Bruce Wayne. He's old, he's jaded, he's seen it all, he's gruff. And that back and forth, whether it's through the Batmobile's comm links or just them talking or learning from each other, it's a pretty cool dynamic. It's really the spine of the series, I think. Now, another thing I enjoyed was seeing some of the older Batman villains show up in this futuristic setting. Maybe not necessarily as themselves, but their themes definitely continue. You've got Bane's drug being used by somebody new, and it's sort of spreading around to the classmates of Terry. You've got Mr. Freeze, who's actually there. And in fact, that was kind of one of my favorite episodes, Mr. Freeze being there and totally dying in the end of that. That's another thing that's cool about this series, is that some of the villains just die. Like, it's interesting to see a show deal with the circumstances surrounding some of these events and these ridiculous things and following through and being like, no, this person, if he came back under the circumstance and got hit by this dude with all this radiation, he would die, and so he does. But that does lead to a certain other awkward thing about this show. Yeah, the Rogues Gallery, that group of supervillains that a superhero has to fight in order to fill out those 52 episodes, they're really kind of hit or miss. There were a few bad guys I liked. I liked Spellbinder. He was kind of a child psychologist that wasn't getting enough money, so he sort of manipulated the emotions of certain characters in order to get what he needed. It's kind of a stupid idea, but it does lead to interesting episodes about what characters fear and what characters want and how he can manipulate the minds of characters in order to see what's going on. That was kind of cool. Ink was also interesting. She was a little bit more than a blob monster. She also had interactions with different characters, which was, again, went to the realms of psychology, which was kind of cool. Now, the main bad guy of the series was kind of started off cool. He was almost like Lex Luthor and a supervillain at the same time, in that he was a rich CEO of Bruce Wayne's company, for that matter, which is kind of interesting. That through the process of him being evil and his shady business practices turned into a radioactive supervillain. This is kind of Batman's fault, the new Batman's fault, which was interesting. But he's only really in like 3 or 4 episodes. He's kind of in the beginning, he's got 1 or 2 in the middle, and then he's just gone. Like, that was the series' Joker. That is supposed to be that sounds blasphemous, but that was supposed to be the main villain, and he's really not there for much of anything. So, what happened? I mean, that was the main thing. Without the presence of strong, reoccurring villains, there's a lot of one-shots where he just kind of has to deal with this one situation, and those one-shots got increasingly ridiculous as the series went. Especially late into season 2 and into season 3, the show and its writers really did whatever they needed to, whether it was against logic or against continuity, in order to get the story they wanted to write. If that meant 17-year-old Batman suddenly disappearing from Gotham City and his high school requirements and his family and his girlfriend, for that matter, which, oh boy, we'll get to her in a minute, to go join the Justice League, then they would do that. Whether it was like some weird dude who had like psychic abilities over ground, sometimes it just got a little silly, especially towards the series end. I mentioned Terry's girlfriend. I think one of the things that got me most about season 3 is that she just disappears. Like, the last 8 episodes, she's just gone. It was kind of getting repetitive, her being like, oh, I want to see Terry, you don't have time for me, and then she just kind of got over it because they kind of wrote themselves into a corner. It's a pretty good episode, but it doesn't really give any sort of end to the show. Now, part of that was because they planned on revisiting the show after Justice League. They said there was going to be a 4th season, and there wasn't. But the people that worked on Batman Beyond and the original Batman Adventures series, they also worked on Justice League. And eventually, when Justice League Unlimited came out, which was kind of newer seasons of the Justice League, there were a couple episodes that wrapped up Batman's Beyond storyline and revealed who exactly Terry McGinnis was. There's also a movie that answers the question of, hey, Bruce Wayne's here, and Barbara Gordon's here, and Mr. Freeze is here, and Ra's al Ghul is here, but where's the Joker? It does answer that question in an interesting way. I'll probably talk about that if I ever get to watch the movie, but I haven't yet. It seems like a pretty interesting thing. It's called Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker. Check it out if you feel like it. Overall, I'd give Batman Beyond maybe a 6.5 out of 10. It's not the best superhero cartoon I've ever seen, and I definitely remember it more fondly than I do now, but it's still pretty cool. Might be worth your time.